Our second topic relates to sharing and receiving feedback. We're going to focus mainly on sharing. We're going to talk about briefly the purpose of feedback. It may be obvious, it may not be so obvious. We'll talk about tips on how to deliver it. We'll get together in small groups to do some of it in that fashion. I will be giving you a different sheet soon, some scenarios to work through. So let's jump right into the notion of feedback. Okay, here's just a definition for our purposes. Is there anything about the definition that jumps out at you? You don't need to be a scientist to figure this out. Anything about our definition? What's that? Well, it doesn't, or does it?
It does, but not in a way that jumps out at it.
It sounds scientific, it sounds technical, but what is the human element here? Or what can be? Just in terms of your interaction with other people as a person. The purpose of the feedback is to either change behavior or produce some kind of different outcome. Yeah? That's what I was kind of hoping for. We got a little techno there. That's all right. Okay? That subsequent or ongoing operations can be altered or corrected. Which means moving forward, the purpose of feedback is not to catch someone, but it's to help people grow. That's what I was going for. I may not have gotten there the way I wanted, but that's what I was going for. You may want to use this as an exercise in other areas of your workplace as well, but this is a nice way to think about where you are and where you want to go. 10 for our purposes is the ideal, 1 is the abyss. What I'm asking you is as follows, really 2 questions, and you can do this in small group discussion around your table. Number 1, in the feedback process, what does a 10 look like? What's happening? What's not happening? What are people doing, saying? How are they saying it or doing it? That would be in a 10, and what does a 1 look like? You may or may not have ever personally experienced one or both of these, but hopefully you could at least imagine what they look like. So take a few minutes now to think about these questions. And somebody in your conversation ideally should be a note taker, please. Ladies and gentlemen, your next question is, where are you now? With your organization. The third question for you to think about, by the way, as we briefly get feedback about the first 2, is where are you/your organization now? So in other words, if 1 is the worst and 10 is the best, where are you today? I'll use this as a coach, and I want you to think about this as well, is that you don't want to try to move from a 3 to a 9 in one fell swoop, because that's unrealistic. But I think what you do want to consider trying to do is, let's say, move from a 3 to a 5. So in your mind, as you think of your number, ask yourself, what can I do to move the needle? 1 or 2 slots over to the right. What came out to you? Let's do some quick ones, rapid fire here. What were some of your 10s?
Things are
Transparency. Honesty.
not surprising.
Okay, so it's predictable, comfortable. What else?
Not attaching someone's sensibilities. Presenting things in such a way where they're not offended by what you're saying, but they understand that you're trying to explain a subject, not.
Right, so in other words, describing the behavior or the outcome, not the person. Nice. Yes?
Feedback opportunity is two-sided.
Okay, two-way communication. Nice. I see the way you're thinking. Yes?
You can tell the person has been preparing for that meeting ahead of time. It's not just
Thoughtful, planned. It doesn't mean they can't be in the moment, but they have a sense of where they want this to go. Excellent. What does a 1 look like? What could it look like? Not that you've ever observed that directly.
I have.
Yes. Oh. David's my go-to guy when I need something. Yes, go ahead.
There was no, there was no trust, no honesty. Things were just so secretive and hidden, and you weren't acknowledged.
Said a lot in there, and a lot of it basically sounded like, not to diminish it, but a lot of the inverse of the 10. that we talked about, right? We talked about trust, the absence of trust. We talked about openness, the absence of openness. Whatever the specifics, a lot of that was the opposite end of what some of our colleagues discussed. Let's do 1 and then 2 and then we're going to move on. Yes?
I think the worst is when somebody is like, I don't like this, but I'm not going to tell you how to make it better.
So kind of dropping a bomb and walking away.
Yes.
Nice. And have a great day, by the way. Yes?
I think there's also a lot more physical elements to 1. Somebody can be more closed off, or you can physically be on like 2 different levels
Uh-huh.
with the feedback. Whereas with a 10, because of that trust and honesty and everything, you're more likely to be on the same physical level and more open to it. But on
When you say physical level, do you mean like on a
might be
different,
closed off, or the supervisor
like
might
the
be-
way that they hold their hands and their posture?
Supervisor might be standing and giving,
Uh-huh.
looking down on the
Interesting.
person.
So you mentioned something that's of super value, even though it's a little bit of a side conversation, which we don't have time for. How many times have I said that today? Okay, and that is, again, coming back to posture for a moment, distance, spacing, things like that. We often don't realize that a lot of things that we do invariably indicate an openness or a lack thereof. So if you're sitting in the same room as somebody and they're talking to you and you're sitting and your body is closed off, you're kind of wrapped up in some type of way, or maybe you're a little bit back, you kind of have a stern face or things like that. In many cases, it implies judgment, it implies an unwillingness to listen, it implies being on the defensive. So even though you might have said, whoa, I was super open to what you had to say, but if your body says X and your words say Y, every single time, I think without exception, the other person is going to read your body and not your words. That's just the way that we are. So be nodding and smiling a little bit and maybe mirroring back what you heard. All of those things make a huge difference in being a little bit physically closer. Doing something demonstrative, taking your phone and putting it down or powering it off. Bringing your chair a little bit up. Sitting at a table that's round and has a feeling of equality. Now, just out of curiosity, did anyone come up with a, how do I move from a whatever number you assessed yourself to a slightly better number? Did that come up at all? A strategy to move the needle? Or can you think of a strategy that could immediately move your needle from wherever you see yourself to wherever you think you can become? Practice what now?
Those 13 things that.
Oh, even on the delegation side? Okay. Practice whatever you learn. Great way to start. Okay? Just even making it a priority, right? Just having the mental focus that this matters will all automatically start to bring you to a better place. Sometimes we don't think of it as important, or there are too many other important things and whatever, our priorities change. So we don't keep it top of mind. But slight things can make a huge difference. And typically speaking, if you've been in a bad way, and I say you, I don't mean you personally, it's going to take time to undo that. Right? We know the notion of Rome wasn't built in a day. The opposite, of course, is also true. If there's distrust, if feedback has been poor, you may think, I'm on the feedback freeway now. I got it. I'm all over this thing. And I'm going to change like there's no tomorrow. It typically will still take time for your people to come around and really buy in that you're a new person, or that you're using a new approach, or the organization has a different level of commitment to what it is that you want to accomplish. So just like it takes time to get there, it takes time to bring it back and then move it the other way. Okay? Yes?
Something that's helped me is I put it on the calendar.
Okay?
So with my supervisor, I have a scheduled time for our feedback with each other.
Yes?
And then for my staff, I have a scheduled time for each of them to meet with me. And actually last Friday, I was not able to meet with one of them, and they're like, she said, well, oh my gosh, we're not meeting today? You know, and because she likes feedback as well.
Uh-huh.
So, and if it's scheduled, I think it becomes more organic and
Nice.
natural conversation.
Yeah, keeping on the schedule is important. Okay, so we're going to transition now into a jigsaw activity. You're going to be given scenarios, and the A and B of each number are kind of like the mirror opposite in the same situation. So one is the boss and one is the employee. Same circumstance, but from different perspectives. And you don't have all of the information. In other words, you only have the information from your angle or your perspective. And this is important to think about, especially in your case, because my sense is that you're going to be giving feedback potentially or getting feedback in both directions as well. So it's good to kind of get the totality of it. Now, what I want you to be thinking about before you start is what are you hearing and what are you feeling as you're giving the feedback as well as you are receiving. Now, it could be the manager is not only delivering feedback, the manager is also hearing responses. And the responses may surprise you. Who knows? Right? We don't know. We will till we try. So I want you to kind of make mental notes of the actual words you're hearing, the outcomes, as well as the actual emotional component that we oftentimes overlook. Please do begin. Turn to the person you're talking to and have a great conversation, everyone. Was there anything you felt was really good about the way that your conversation was approached, both in terms of word and also in posture/deed? In the feedback process, yes.
Dave's like a full foot taller than me.
I noticed you went in the back there to have your conversation.
Well, I'm really I can get overstimulated.
Stimulation,
Easy.
sure, okay.
Like, I would have been listening. We had a conversation about this yesterday.
Okay.
At lunch about how like we can't talk when there's like a million conversations happening.
Sure.
around us, so we removed ourselves.
Yeah,
But like, Dave is not my direct supervisor at work, but we do work together.
Okay.
He has this like, really amazing way of like not making me feel very small and like leaning down and punching over a little bit to like maybe get a little more on my level, and also speaking in this way and just like facial expression, the whole thing just feels like warm and even.
he was looking for a stool, but he didn't find one. I'm just kidding. But it's interesting that you mentioned that because I'll mention something as sort of a side point, and that is ideally when you want to give the feedback, go to their workspace rather than bring them to yours if possible. In other words, if it's a shared workspace where the conversation will be overheard, probably not so feasible. Then at least find a neutral place to talk. If you as the leader bring someone that's your direct report into your office, you're already shifting the balance towards you and away from them, which creates more of a feeling of I'm in trouble. So it's something to be mindful of.
And Rebecca, as the manager, was very open and smiling, but she was.
I noticed that, by the way.
But she was smiling as she said, if things don't get better, we'll have to let you go.
Yes, we will.
And
And isn't this a glorious Thursday?
so,
Yeah.
So I was, that just kind of like, son of a.
Right. If it feels inauthentic, people will read it. But thank you for mentioning at least the smiley part. Yes.
I was just gonna say that we both struggled with our parts because when I was reading it, I was like, I would never do that. Like so we walked into this and I'm like, I'm about to do something I would never in reality ever do to you. And so and she was like, well, I'm about to say things to you that I would never in reality say to you. So we really kind of struggled with it in a sense because I think I just came to the conclusion that we're very good managers. And that's why.
Frankly, that was my conclusion also. Yeah.
But like my chief complaint was that she doesn't have time for me, but I was like, oh, open half hour in her schedule. I'm going to pop in there and have a serious conversation.
I think you guys did that also, right? I heard that. I heard that.
This is my fault.
Yeah.
Like I agreed with her. Like I'm the problem here, not you.
Okay. Okay, so long as we don't take this overly personally, this will be good.
But
Yeah.
I thought that it was good that we were both like through the process in some ways that we both kind of struggled with it because it helped us. I think for me, it helped me identify some of those strategies that I've developed that have been helpful in these scenarios.
Sure.
That I don't know that I would have articulated in the same way if you would just ask me like, how do you get your supervisor's position? So I still think it was helpful, but kind of in a
Okay.
illuminating.
To learn what not to do in some ways.
Well, yeah, and to help me kind of pay attention to the skills that I'm already using that I didn't really realize were skills. You know what I mean? Like.
And to affirm what you've already accomplished and what you're using and how it's
Right,
helping.
so I-
Now, let's move into strategies for sharing feedback. Number one, remember it starts with you. Like we talked about before with delegation, in many cases it's a cultural thing, right? You set the tone, you set the weather. You don't want to be that guy. We talked about leave alone, zap. Do you remember that reference before? Okay, so leave alone, leave alone, leave alone, zap. You know what that means? Can you imagine what that refers to?
Yeah, that means like,
I'm ignoring,
and then all of a sudden,
boom.
the bomb goes
Right, right. So in other words, it starts with you in terms of creating the culture, but also creating the sense that feedback is normative and natural and part of what we want to build in. right? Not something we do when we have problems. Some of it may just have to be with the way you developed as a worker, as a professional. It could be the way that you were treated, when you were developing. It could be the fact that you are independent in your thinking. You don't need a lot of feedback. You're sort of self-driven. So maybe you think nobody else needs the feedback. But oftentimes that's not the case. And we really need to set the proper tone. So we want to leave that zap concept alone. If there are issues, ideally, you don't want to jump on them the very first second, but try to find a way to make it that it doesn't feel like all of a sudden things are now in a terrible situation and now you're coming to me. Right? I would have liked to hear from you sooner when I could have dealt with it. And I've experienced that firsthand from board of directors or others where I felt, had you told me sooner, I could have probably nipped this in the bud. But it didn't happen that way, and then I really had to pick up the pieces, and that wasn't good for me, and it wasn't good for anybody. You're not doing anybody a favor by letting a problem fester and germinate and all of this until it morphs into something big and ugly. You want to deal with it where you can, and really where constructive action can be taken. Okay? Leading with open-ended questions, very valuable. Instead of saying, why did you? What were you thinking when? Right? And also not yes or no. More like, give me some insight into, or what caused you to. Maybe you can even say, I noticed that yesterday when this happened, you did this. Give me your thought process.
That's what I do. It's asking, what was going on when this happened.
State the behavior and then ask the question. Right. So it's less about you, the person. Don't judge the person, judge the behavior, or at least ask about it. Excellent. Okay. What can be improved upon for the next time? Some more tips. We talked about immediacy. Again, not jumping on someone, but if you see a problem, talk about it right away. Don't let it wait indefinitely. Anything else here that kind of speaks to you in particular? Being specific, not generalizing. Tie feedback to goals. That's always something that keeps it very objective. Try to avoid overloading and try to keep it as impersonal as possible. And by that I don't mean show no emotion and distance yourself. I just mean make it less about me being upset. Right? Now you can say, when you do this, it makes me feel. You have to be careful how much of that you want to introduce. Right? Is it mainly about you? Think about from the listener's perspective. Do I care mainly about how you feel, or I care mainly about my job and the performance that I did and the people that I impacted and things like that? So it's sort of like a balance between the two. Okay, other tips. Using suggestive words could be very helpful. Consider, maybe, would you think about, how about this? From now on. Do you know what the sandwich technique is?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to avoid that because it feels disingenuous. Right? Oh, you're really great. What a lovely day today. You stink. I love your outfit. Have a great day. Right? We want to avoid the kind of sandwich concept where you couch the concern in all this other strategic fluff. You have a concern. It doesn't mean you have to walk in and immediately hit somebody over the head, but the focus should be clear and consistent. People appreciate honesty. They don't want you to kind of, fake them through where you're ultimately looking to go with this. You didn't call the meeting to compliment, their outfit. You called the meeting to deal with a problem. Let's talk about earn. What was the event, the action, the result, and the next steps? So let's look at an example of this. You have that on your paper, so we can look at the example here on the screen. So I'll read it to you. During yesterday's weekly team meeting, that was the event, that's the situation, you answered your phone and stepped away, which of course is a big no-no. But before we get into the judgment, all I'm describing is the action. What did you do? Next one is, what was the result of what you did? Again, it's not a judgment of you. I'm looking at your result. And the result was, in this case, when we have time set aside for meetings, it's important that you're present and focused. And by stepping away to take a call, you are neither. So you're kind of setting the expectation, or you're resetting it in the context of what the result was of your behavior. And then finally, where do we go from here? You don't want to just drop a bomb and walk away. You want to say, this is the outcome, so now how do we change it moving forward? So in the future, leave your phone outside or power it off or whatever it might be. How would you feel about leaving your phone at your desk during meetings or only answering for emergency calls? Is that a fair suggestion? Now you're saying, yeah, like conceptually, but is it fair if you were listening to it? If someone was saying this to you directly?
I think if it would depend if it was a one-off thing or if it was a consistent thing. If it was a one-off thing, I'd probably start with like, I saw you answered your phone stepped away, is everything okay?
Yeah.
And kind of go there and find out, because maybe it was an emergency.
So you can tell I'm a green and she's probably a blue, or at least somewhat. I'm just kidding. But you remember,
No,
I don't know if you remember
yeah.
the reference from before. But yeah, being empathetic is still okay. This doesn't have to be cold and calculated. You can couch it in a more upbeat or a more empathetic fashion. But the main thing is, again, I'm focusing on the behavior. What was the result of the behavior? Not a judgment, but this is what is noticeable, or this is what could be the outcome. It may not have happened here, but it could happen another time. And what do we need to do differently moving forward?